Okay, this video is about conditional statements. And a conditional statement is a logical statement that uses if and then. So make sure that you, make sure that you go ahead and you write down this right here. So a conditional statement is a logical statement that uses if and then. Pause the video if you need to. But as you're writing that down, or after you come back here, I'm going to talk about these little pictures here. So this is an excellent example of a conditional statement that's sort of, well, it's kind of funny, I guess. But anyways, so if you run with scissors, then you might get hurt. So this is a good idea, a good example of a conditional statement. Not a good idea, but a good example of a conditional statement. All right. So here we see this little guy running with his scissors, and then you might get hurt. So we've got this little girl at the doctor. So don't do that. Don't run with scissors. That's the idea. Is you'll notice that in this picture that it uses the words if and then, and that is what basically makes a conditional statement, is that it has two things that are if and then, and it's a logical statement. So this makes sense, right? If you run with scissors, then you might get hurt. So that's something that makes sense and is, I guess, logical. To the right of that picture, you'll see we have what looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, and this is actually some computer code. I'm not really sure what computer language this is. I've done a little bit of programming, so I kind of understand, but if you like computers and stuff, an if conditional statement is actually something that they use with computers. And you can see this word if. So if whatever the heck this is, if that happens, then they want you to print something. So basically this is telling the computer, if this bizarre thing, whatever this means, happens, then print some stuff. Okay, so this is some pretty complicated code, but this is basically that's what an if-then statement is, or a conditional statement. If something is true, then do something else. Or if this is true, then this is true. And that's the idea. So a conditional statement is outlined by the two words if and then. Right? That's the idea. Okay. Let's look at it in more detail. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Okay, so the form of a conditional statement. Okay, you need to write this down also. This is super important right here. You have if, and then what we call the hypothesis, and then after then comes the conclusion. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at this one. So if you run with scissors, then you might get hurt. Well, this right here, you run with scissors, is called the hypothesis. Now, if you really like science, you might think of a hypothesis as something that's like a little bit different. A hypothesis in science is something like an educated guess, like if you light something on fire, my hypothesis is it will turn to ashes, right? And then you light it on fire and see if you're right. Please don't try that, but that's the idea of a hypothesis in science class. Well, a hypothesis in logic or math class is like the first part of a conditional statement. So it's sort of the if this thing happens, then this is going to happen, right? So if you run with scissors, you might get hurt. So this is the hypothesis. And you'll notice that hypothesis is a very large word, and it takes a while to write. So instead of using and writing the word hypothesis all the time, you can just use the letter P. So we use the letter P in logic to represent the hypothesis. And then we have so that's our if, then we have our word then, and then here we go, you might get hurt. So this is the conclusion. Or we can use the letter Q to abbreviate the conclusion. Conclusion. So when you're labeling hypothesis and conclusion, you can just use P and Q. You don't have to write them out. All right. So if a shape has three sides, then it is a rectangle. So our if is right here. A shape has three sides, and that's our hypothesis. So any shape that has three sides, it's a triangle. So that's a logical statement, a conditional statement. So any shape that has three sides is a triangle. So basically, if this is true right here, then this is true. Here's another one that's a little bit more algebraic looking. So if x equals 5, then 3x equals 15. So if we wanted to label this one, this would be our P, our hypothesis, and this would be our conclusion Q. Okay. So again, an if statement is logical, or a conditional statement is logical, we have x equals 5. 3 times x would be 15 because x is 5. So that's a conditional statement. Okay, let's look at this some more. Remember, you can pause the video anytime or go back if you don't understand something, like why I'm writing these P's and Q's everywhere. And by the way, that's actually where that word, you ever heard this thing, mind your P's and Q's? That's where it comes from. Is mind your like, make sure that you're paying attention to your actions, because your actions have a conclusion. Anyways, here we go. So this is an interesting thing. For all conditional statements, when the hypothesis is true, the conclusion is also true. So if you have a conditional statement, and assuming that that statement is real, so in other words, it's true, right? So if running with scissors actually could lead to you getting hurt, then if you actually do run with the scissors, which I don't recommend, you might get hurt. That's a true thing. Okay, so in other words, if you do this, if you do this, this will happen. So basically, if you do the hypothesis, then the conclusion happens to you. Sort of like cause and effect. I used to explain conditional statements as cause and effect. They're not always cause and effect, right? Cause and effect, right? You yell at your friend, and then your friend is mad at you. That's cause and effect, right? Cause and effect. If you run, you'll sweat, right? So that's cause and effect. Running is the cause, and sweating is the effect. Or if you talk too much in class and fool around, then you might get caped or have to do some calisthenics. So those are cause and effect. So that's the idea. So if you do this, then this will happen. And that's the sort of like the idea of a conditional statement. Okay, so this one here says, if you run with scissors, then you might get hurt. So you run with scissors. What can you conclude? Well, what you can conclude is that you might get hurt. That's what you can conclude. You might get hurt. That's the answer to this question. So if you run with scissors, then you might get hurt. Alright, so then let's say you go ahead and run with scissors. What can you conclude? You might get hurt. So please don't run with the scissors. Alright. If a shape has 3 sides, then it is a triangle. Well, let's say that I showed you a shape has 3 sides, okay, like this. What can you conclude about the shape? Based on this statement, if it's got 3 sides, then it's a triangle. So here we have a shape with 3 sides. Well, it kind of has a little tail on it, but let's say I did it just perfect. The shape has 3 sides. It's a triangle. So the shape is a triangle. Is a triangle. Not too bad. Now, what does this have to do with math class? Well, a lot of things in geometry have conditional statements in them. A lot of the ways that we talk about different postulates and theorems and things. So this is important. It's my opinion that everyone should take a logic class, and we should just teach a full class on logic. But if you ever get a chance to do that, like at a community college or in college or something, I would definitely take that, because the ability to think logically is an extremely important skill in life. So anyways, moving on. Get off my soapbox here. Okay, so here's another one. Underline the hypothesis and circle the conclusion of each statement. All right, so go ahead and try it. Underline your hypothesis, circle your conclusions. Did you try it? Pause the video and try it if you hadn't, because I'm going to give you the answer. Okay, so this one here, our hypothesis P is you study. And then the conclusion is you will earn better grades. There we go. And this is the way your book presents this and asks you to underline and circle and stuff. So I'm doing it the same way. All right, on this one here, if an angle measures 90 degrees, then it is a right angle. Okay, So I don't know why this one ended up in a different font. That kind of gives it away, but anyways, I didn't tell it to do that. So that would underline that, and then this is our conclusion. Okay. So the angle measures 90 degrees. That's the hypothesis. Conclusion, it's a right angle. And this one here, oops. Two angles are congruent if they have the same measure. This one here isn't a great conditional statement, is it? Not that great. Not very well written. But we can still identify a hypothesis and a conclusion. The hypothesis is the part that follows the if, or it's the, you could call it the cause, right? So the cause is two angles have the same measure, right? They have the same measure. That would cause them to be congruent. So this one would actually be backwards. This one probably was a little bit tricky. Okay, because this is like the cause. Two angles have the same measure, and the effect is they're congruent. So the reason I put this one on here, I don't really like this that much, but I put this on here because of your book, and you might see this in other places. Sometimes people will write conditional statements like this and not really write them the if-then way like you're supposed to, but then still ask you to identify hypothesis and conclusion. So I wanted to expose you to that and show you what that would be like. Okay. Write a conclusion to each conditional statement. So what I want you to do is look at these and see if you can write a conclusion to it. And I'm going to write one too, and my conclusion might be a little bit different than yours, but we're going to see what you do with this. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and try these two. Okay, here we go. So if you trip and fall down, then there's lots of possibilities for this one, but I'm going to say then you will scrape your knee. How about that? You will scrape your knee. Okay. If you fall down, then you will scrape your knee. So if you put something in there like you'll get hurt or some sort of a consequence of tripping and falling, then you did this one correctly. All right, number two. If two angles are vertical, then we can say they are congruent. You could have also said they're equal in measure. You could have said they are the same shape, something like that. But if two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. Okay, if you're able to do that, then you're understanding conditional statements. All right, last one, I'm going to ask you to write a conditional statement based on a couple of sentences here. Okay, so rewrite each of the conditional statements. So here I've just put a statement, and here I've also put a statement, and I want you to go ahead and try to see if you can rewrite this statement using if and then properly. So I want you to rewrite this. So rewrite using if and then. Okay. Rewrite this thing using if and then. See if you can do it. Also do this one. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and give it a shot. Okay, hopefully you did so. All right, I'm going to do this, and sometimes when you do this, you have to change the wording around a little bit, so these can be very, very tricky. So I'm going to show you what I would do, and then we'll go from there. So we're going to be practicing this some in class. Okay, after you flip the switch, the lights come on. So I'm going to say, this seems to me to be the cause here, and this would be the effect. So I'm going to put if you flip the switch, then the lights come on. Okay. Now, if you included this word after, that's fine. If after you flip the switch, then the lights come on. Oopsie, I forgot my N for then. I often do that. I will often leave letters off of things. Okay. If you flip the switch, then the lights come on. So that'd be a good way to write this sentence. Okay. Number two, this one's a little trickier because this one's backwards. And sometimes you'll see them when they're backwards, and it's really annoying. So let me show you how to deal with this. You want to identify the cause and effect. So remember, like this one here, this was sort of our cause. Our cause is you flip the switch. The effect would be to the lights coming on. Right? This one here, vertical angles are equal in measure when two lines intersect. So what causes vertical angles? The intersecting lines. So this is actually the cause right here. And a key word is the word when, whenever, after, something like that. Some sort of a time word. So when you see a time word like this, like when or after or during or something like that, that's a good cue that that might be the cause coming up. And then this would be our effect right here. So this one's actually written backwards. All right, so if I was to do this as a conditional statement, I would say if two lines intersect, then vertical angles are equal in measure. Okay, there we go. All right, these are a little tricky. We will be practicing them. When I give you your quiz, it's going to be multiple choice, so you can kind of, figure out which one they're going to be. It's not going to be quite this difficult. But that's the idea of conditional statements. Good job.